Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Breaking the Lens of Bias. And my name is Kat Killian. I'm glad to be here with you today on this cold and blustery November day. Anyway, today I am here to talk about the movie that has just been shown at the New York Film Festival, documentary film festival called 1946. And basically, what this movie is, it's a documentary about the translation of the Bible, the first translation to include the word homosexuality in the Bible. And it's all about actually how that word was mistranslated. And so, what I, you know, a lot of people have very, very strong feelings about this. They say or homosexuality is a sin, and that's it. And use that to justify keeping homosexualities from the church, bringing shame and guilt to those people who are in their deepest being identify as homosexual, trans, or otherwise. And what this really does is it goes back and it looks at the original words in the context of the society in which they were in and how that was mistranslated by bringing in 20th century ideas into what's essentially a first century document, by and large, or compilation thereof, or as it went through the centuries and was finally adopted by the third century. Yeah, fourth century. Anyway, it's old, and the ideas at that time when it was written and created, um, the concepts were very different. And here's where the bias comes in. When we're looking at historical documents or historical um, incidents or things that happened, and we look at them through our lenses of our society today, we tend to think of them in a different way than that it may have been intended. And so, therefore, part of breaking the lens of bias here, and I'm not going to necessarily talk about a specific bias today, but I think you'll see where I'm going. It's basically trying to see where applying something from yesterday that was meant in one context, to a different context, which is today's. So, for example, let's just take something in the U.S. I don't think that in this day and age anyone would go back and say, well, it was not a, it was a, women were not originally allowed to vote in America. It was thought that it was a white man's thing, so let's go back to that. There may be a few people who might think that, but nobody is going to say that. Nobody's going to go back and say that we're going to deny African American people the right to vote, or we're going to reinstitute slavery because that was what originally was in the Constitution. I don't think I don't think anybody or most people would never argue that. That's why we have the amendments to the Constitution, because it allows us to change them. So, how this ties into biblical narrative, as I see it, and again, I'm expecting people may disagree with me strongly on this, and that's okay. But when I look at something and I see it and I understand it in its historical context, and the movie's going to go much more into this. I have not seen it yet. I have seen previews. I am one of the lucky few who get to actually preview the movie, and I will be doing that this Friday. So I'm really looking forward to that, and maybe next week I will comment a little bit further on that after I see the movie. But it's actually going back and looking at the historical context, looking at the original works where they were translated from, and then how they were translated. And the nuance of meaning gets lost in translation, and then add that on top of the cultural differences, and it just becomes kind of overwhelming. And so we interpret the Bible to be a what this is, and it's infallible. there are groups of people who think that. I am not one of them by any stretch of the means, because I have to look at all of these things in context. I have to look at it as, in a number of different ways. So, um, in addition, I'll just say this, pivot a little bit here. A number of people have gone out and wrote criticism of the movie before it was even released, maybe based on the previews, maybe based on reading of it, or maybe just based on their prejudice against this topic. And any argument in any other direction uh, is considered heresy. And so, therefore, they're just going to speak up against it. And so, I would urge you, if you have any interest in it or in this topic at all, and you really want to look at it in a thorough way, because from what I understand, I did have a friend who has facilitated this showing. She has seen it twice, once the original rough cut, and then the at the film festival. And so, my understanding is that other sides are presented. The filmmaker's father is one of those people who holds the view that homosexuality is a sin and that there were errors in this. And so, I will wait to see myself. I'm not going to go in there biased one way or another to see how balanced it is or unbalanced it is. But I would urge anyone who has interest in this topic to actually look at it themselves and to consider the evidence under that. And perhaps that may cause you to rethink some of the views that you may have on this subject. So I'm very interested to hear, what other people think on this subject. But it's critical that before we criticize anything, that we actually understand thoroughly the arguments on both sides of that issue, and realize that if you're coming from a particular premise, I know fundamentalist Christians or many evangelicals will hold the inerrancy of the Bible to be that, and it's a literal interpretation. Some even go so far as to say the King James Version is the only Bible, and then I don't get how that works with other languages. But that's a question that, again, the logic kind of dictates that there's a fallacy of thinking in here, or a biased viewpoint of how things should be. Um, and it's not to necessarily criticize anybody's faith or anything like that, but to open minds and to open hearts. I think we need to look at things critically, whether it be political views, whether it be religious views, um, or other controversial topics, to understand all sides of the story, and then to make an informed and well-intentioned viewpoint of that. But when you say this is the way it is and you close that off, you are being closed. So this is a short video today, because I don't have a lot to say in it, but I really want to encourage you all to, when this movie finally gets released to the general public, whether it's on a streaming service or it will be in theaters, I want to encourage you to go and view it with an open mind. Don't just go to protest one way or the other. Go and view it with an open mind, and then look at your own faith traditions, and then come back. And if it isn't that important to you, make a conclusion then. Don't judge it before you've seen it, and see it for yourself. Don't necessarily read what someone else has said about it, because they're coming from their own biased point of view, perhaps, and look at that. So 1946, the movie, Mistranslation That Changed the World. I'm looking forward to seeing it next week. I will actually not be live, because it is Thanksgiving and I will be celebrating Thanksgiving. But I will have a pre-recorded episode that I'm going to do this weekend for you on Thursday, and it will actually be about Thanksgiving. But I will talk a little bit further about some of my impressions about 1946, the movie. So I'm hoping you see that. I thank you for tuning in today, And I hope to see you next week, if not live. And I understand because most of us in the US will be eating Thanksgiving meals at that time. But I hope you'll catch me on a replay. And feel free to comment. Feel free to follow the page. There's also the Breaking the Lens of Bias YouTube channel, so you can also follow that. Please like, please subscribe to get this going. And again, I always encourage you to put your comments in there. That's going to help me to build content, build topics that you all may be interested in. So I'm talking about things I'm interested in, and I'm interested in many things and most things, but I want to really hear what you have to say and what your opinions are on any of the topics that I've discussed so far in the show. And so thanks for tuning in. Again, my name's Kat Killian. I will see you next week. Enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday with your friends and family, and I will see you next week. But I will also be back live in 2 weeks from today. So have a great day. See you next time. Bye.